I wake up to a mockingbird song, look out my window at a new day's dawn, and the golden sun melts the morning dew away. There's an angel lying next to me. Across the hall the kids are sound asleep, almost like a dream. It's another day in America. See the children play. It's another day in America. People hand in hand joining sea to shine and see. Work to earn my pay for another day in America. It's another day in the USA, living life and being free. Niagara's waterfalls another day. Grand Canyon's taking people's breath away, and the Rockies stand as strong as the land they're in. The moon is shining on the silver shore, and pride is rising where the eagles soar. God has blessed us all with another day in America. See the children play. It's another day in America. People hand in hand joining sea to shining sea. Work to earn my pay for another day in America. It's another day in the USA, living life and being free. It's another day in the USA, living life and being free. See the children play in the USA. It's another day. See the children play.
Good morning and welcome to North Bristol Christian Church. This is the first time we've tried to do it quite this way. We've done a bit along the same lines during the COVID time. But today actually is a wonderful day of celebration as we celebrate all the benefits that we hold together as Americans. And you know, even in spite of so much of the junk that's been going on these last few years, I am still excited to be able to honor this wonderful country, this great country in which we live. And I hope that you are as well. Even though we did the first couple of songs we're going to be doing today last week, we're going to do them again. I wanted to do a big patriotic celebration last week before we left. But today, of course, is July 4th, so let's share some patriotic things together as we start off by honoring this wonderful land in which we live. Let's stand together and start off by saying the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As we have just finished praying together, let's continue to look to God as we ask for His direction in our lives and for our country. My country, 'tis of Thee.
I
This morning, as we come to the communion table, let's indeed remember the many men and women who have said, "Take me, America. I want to be used to help this great country to continue to be all that it is." And most of them have done it without any regards to their own selves or their own safety. Well, Jesus did the same thing for us when he went to Calvary. Most of us, well, probably not all of us, don't have the ability any longer to say, "I want to serve my country. Lead me wherever I'm needed." But we can say to God, "Lord, lead me to Calvary. I will serve you in whatever way it is that you need."
King of my life, I crown thee now. Thine shall the glory be, lest I forget thy thorn-crowned brow. Lead me to Calvary, lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget thine agony, lest I forget thy love for me. Lead me to Calvary. May I be willing, Lord, to bear daily my cross for thee, even thy cup of grief to share. Thou hast borne all for me, lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget thine agony, lest I forget thy love for me. Lead me to Calvary.
Take, eat. This is my body, which is given for you. We've heard those words many times over the years. But did you know that those words were actually commonly used in Jesus' day as part of a wedding ceremony? Say what? The man in the ceremony was promising to the women, "Eat this bread. It represents how I pledge my body and my life to you. My solemn promise to you is that I will protect you, I will defend you, I will provide for you. I give my body to you." And the disciples, when they heard these words, may have been a little puzzled when the master used them and there wasn't a bride or groom or wedding party in sight. But when Jesus left them, they were no longer puzzled. Just as he ascended to a cloud into heaven, he promised them with something else, with the words, "I am with you always, even to the end of the world." And it is because he allowed his body to be broken for you and me that that is possible. Let's eat together.
Lead me to Calvary.
Jesus Christ is our provider, our protector, our shield, our shelter. The bread that we eat is his promise to us. Today is all about promises. The cup that we drink is his promise to us. And with the bread and this juice, he said, "I do." And so as we drink this cup today, I would like for you as well to say, "I do," as we thankfully drink together. In 1 Corinthians 10:31, we find, so whether you eat or drink, or whatever you do, do all for the glory of God. Giving sacrificially changes us into more faith-filled and risk-taking followers of Jesus Christ. But sometimes if our sacrificial giving becomes more of a habit, it can sometimes be a little difficult to remember how much and in what ways we may have been changed. And so this morning I want you to take just a moment and remember that first time that you stretched your faith and you gave more than you could spare. Was it worth it? I'm sure most of you would say yes. It was for me. And that's why I think it's good for God to remind us to go to the next level in our giving. I want to suggest to you to try to do the same. If you give nothing at all, then give something. If you are just giving a little something, give a percentage of your income. And then bring it up to the tithe that God asked for, the 10% of your income. And then give even more in your offerings of love. Now, I know that can be a little scary at times, but you've got to trust that whenever God sponsors your risks, He will also provide for your reward. And the greatest reward is more faith. So don't forget this morning before you leave, the offering plates up here or in back if you're online, visiting, whatever it is, make sure you allow God to bless you through your offerings as well this week. Well, there was a wedding rehearsal where a groom approached the pastor with an unusual offer. He said, I will give you $100 if you will change the wedding vows. When you get to me and the part about where it says that I promise to love and honor and obey, forsaking all others, be faithful to her forever, I'd appreciate if you just kind of skip that part. And he passed the minister a $100 bill and walked away satisfied. The day the wedding arrived, they reached the part of the ceremony where the vows are exchanged, and when it came to that time for the groom's vows, the pastor looked him in the eye and said, will you promise to prostrate yourself before her, obey her every wish and command, serve her breakfast in bed every morning of your life, and swear eternally before God and your lovely wife that you will not ever even look at another woman as long as you both shall live? The groom gulped a bit, looked around, and replied in a meek voice, yes. After the wedding, the groom approached the pastor, pulled him aside, and he hissed, I thought we had a deal. Pastor reached in his pocket, pulled the $100 bill out, put it in the groom's hand, whispered, sorry, son, she made a much better deal. Let me tell you something. God does not renege on His promises. Now, for the next few weeks, I want to take a short break from our study on the women in Scripture that we've been looking at for these last month and a half. And I want to talk about a summer of promises. Promises that God has given to us in His Word. In a world of broken promises, God can be counted on. Now, last week we had this wonderful patriotic celebration. God has honored this great land that was begun on the foundation of His Word. Men who clung tightly to biblical principles and reliance upon God to start this country, to write the Declaration of Independence, to put the laws in effect that God has honored from then until today. And God led these men, and He has honored His promise to keep them. And we are recipients of their dedication to God because God keeps His promises. In 1994, a 67-year-old carpenter named Russell Herman died in Marion, Illinois. In his last will and testament, he bequeathed the following: $2.4 billion to the town of Cave Rock, $2.4 billion to East St. Louis, $1.5 billion for projects in southeastern Illinois, and in a final act of unprecedented generosity, he gave $6 trillion to the Federal Reserve to try to pay off the national debt. Well, course, it'd be a whole lot more today. We owe 28 trillion today. There's only one problem. At the time of his death, the only thing that Mr. Herman actually owned was a 1983 Olds Tornado. Russell Herman may not have left behind anything of any monetary value, but he did leave us with a good reminder, and that is that you cannot give away what you don't possess. Bottom line is, he didn't have the resources that were necessary to make any of that a reality. But not so with God. God has all the means to make good on his promises. And our comforting idea today is this: in a world of broken promises, God can be relied upon. As we begin this new series called A Summer of Promises, let's begin with a definition. The Merriam-Webster definition says that a promise is a declaration that one will do or refrain from doing something specified that gives the person to whom it is made a right to claim the performance or forbearance of a specified act. In other words, here's the deal. When God says something, that settles it. James MacDonald says that a promise is the assurance that God gives to his people so that they can walk by faith while they wait for him to work. D.L. Moody has added, God never made a promise that was too good to be true. And then here's another statement that's worth pondering. God never overpromises and he never underdelivers. Isn't that great? God never overpromises and he never underdelivers. So let me give you a few thoughts this morning about promises. Number one, we need to put the promises of God in their full context to be able to get the meanings. Very popular verses found in Hebrews 13:5. Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. And that's a very comforting verse. But seldom do I hear people quote the first part of that verse, which says, keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God has said, I will never leave you or forsake you. And because of the promise of God's presence, we can live free from the love of money, and we can live in contentment, like we talked about Eve about 6 weeks ago. Remember when we studied her life? And that's a promise that we all need. Secondly, let's take a look at a very popular passage in Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. You know, if you go back a couple verses 1 to 3, we see where this is actually just a sentence in a letter that was sent to the Jewish exiles that were living in Babylon. In verses 4 to 9, the people are told to build houses, settle down, increase in numbers, seek the peace and prosperity of the city which has carried you into exile. And of course they're warned not to listen to any false prophets as well. And then in verse 10 we hear a promise that when 70 years are completed in Babylon, God says, I will come and fulfill my gracious promise to bring you back to this place. And this promise that we take so often was actually given to God's people who were in captivity. They were going to be there for 70 years, and then God's going to fulfill his plans for them. So there are 6 truths here that jump out at me when I take a look at this verse. Number 1, God is indeed a promise keeper. You believe that? God is a promise keeper. Secondly, God knows everything. He is an omniscient God. He knows everything about our past, present, future. He has everything all taken care of because of it. And God is not out to harm you. He loves you. God wants to help you. God has plans for you. God has very specific plans for each one of you individually, specific for what he wants you to do in this life that he's put you in the people that he has you in contact with on a daily basis. God has plans for you. And finally, with God, our future is filled with hope. Thirdly, focus on promises that are repeated elsewhere in Scripture. One way to know if a promise is universal is if you find that same promise elsewhere in the Bible. For example, Joshua 1:5 is a promise to Joshua where God says, "As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you or forsake you." And then we turn back to Hebrews 13:5. Remember, we just talked about that a moment ago. I will never leave you or forsake you. And I'll bet you that most of you know that verse, but you thought that it came from Jesus. And it did. And we all know that Jesus said, "I will never leave you or forsake you." But God also told Joshua. God also said in Hebrews, that same passage, "I will never leave you or forsake you." So we need to pay very special attention to repeated promises. Fourthly, be willing to accept all of God's promises, not just the ones that you like. For example, God also promises persecution and suffering and difficulty for the Christ follower. John 16:33. In this world, you're going to have trouble. You know, we can't put the nice, pleasant promises up on our walls and on the staircases and wherever you put your Bible verses at. And then we are surprised when the suffering comes. Having said that, we can also hold on to the promise in the second half of that verse because we know that we do not suffer alone. God says, "Take heart." Jesus says, "I have overcome the world." Fifthly, there's some promises that are conditional. God will do his part when we do ours. Often we see this in if-then passages. In Deuteronomy 11:22-23, "If you carefully observe all these commands I'm giving you to follow, to love the Lord your God, to walk in all of his ways, to hold fast to him, if you're willing to do that, then the Lord will drive out all those nations before you, and you will dispossess nations larger and stronger than you." Fantastic. Conditional promises are found in the New Testament. Here's one from James 4:10. "Humble yourself before the Lord, and he will lift you up." You know, our country was built on if-then promises from God. For well more than 200 years, our country followed, and they respected God's promises, and God made this country a leader in this world because of it. Sixthly, promises need to be appropriated and applied by faith. Charles Spurgeon has said, "Do not treat God's promises as if they were curiosities for a museum, but believe them and use them." In the book of Joshua, when God gave the land back to them, Joshua 21:43, "So the Lord gave Israel all the land that he had sworn to give to their forefathers." He didn't give it back to them, he gave it to them. I misspoke there. So God promises and follows through with his promises. And finally, hold on to hope. Sometimes we have to wait a long time before a promise is fulfilled in our lives. Hebrews 10:23-24. "Let us hold unswervingly to the hope that we profess, for he who has promised is faithful." Don't give up. Don't bail when you think that God has failed you. He hasn't. Verse 36, Hebrews 10. You need to persevere so that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what he has promised. Remember that a promise is the assurance that God gives his people so that they can walk by faith while they wait. Let me say that again. A promise is the assurance that God gives to his people so that they can walk by faith while they are waiting. In a world of broken promises, God can be counted on. And as we begin this series, I thought it'd be good for us to soak up some of these scriptures that speak about God's promises. And the few that I've given you today are by no means exhaustive. There are tons of them. I looked them up, and it's going to take a while to get through some of them. But I hope to try to increase your understanding that God loves to make and to keep his promises for his people. And my other aim for doing this here this summer is to try to whet your appetites to dig into God's word for yourself, so that you can have the joy of discovering God's promises for yourself. I urge you, Google a search on God's promises, promises that are found in God's word. A couple of last things. Fact of the matter is, you can open yourself up to unleash God's power in your life. You don't have to have some other book or blessing or seminar or experience if you know Jesus. 2 Peter 1:3, his divine power has given us everything that we need for a godly life through our knowledge of him who has called us by his own glory and goodness. And you notice there's that past tense there. He has given us everything with his divine power. You have everything that you need right now that God wants you to have, because he has given you everything. Past tense. But we need to utilize his promises. God's promises are great. They are precious. And that word great is a superlative word that means megas, which means exceedingly outstanding. His promises are to be prized because they are precious. God's promises are mega magnificent. John Bunyan spent much of his life in prison for his faith. He wrote these words: "The pathway of life is strewn so thickly with the promises of God that it is impossible to take one step without treading upon one of them." In 2 Corinthians 1:20, "For no matter how many promises God has made, they are yes in Christ. And so through him the Amen is spoken by us to the glory of God." The promises of God are not yes and then no. They're not I don't know. They're not maybe so. The promises of God are yes. And so let me give you a couple of ways to try to allow God's promises to percolate into your life this week. As you read your Bible, underline every promise that you come across. And then share those promises with your family, around the dinner tables, as you're sitting in the living room, as you're driving in the car, whatever it is. God's entire communication can be put into two words: I promise. We don't have to worry if he's going to make good on his promise, because he has promised that he will never overpromise nor never underdeliver. And when he came to this earth as God the Son, he died, he rose again, and because of that, he guaranteed that those who are adopted into his family through faith will indeed inherit all that he has promised. In a world of broken promises, God can be counted upon. So in what ways do you need to stand on the promises of God this morning, this week? What problems are you facing right now? Are you discouraged? Are you afraid, lonely, overwhelmed, lost, anxious, confused? Because if so, and even if you're not, are you ready to stand on his promises? If so, I'm going to ask you to stand up right now and let's sing together this closing song of affirmation of faith. Hallelujah. Father, we are so grateful to you today that we can indeed stand on your promises. And Lord, when we begin looking at the many, many dozens and hundreds of promises that you've given us in your word, oh Lord, there is such a wealth here that sometimes we don't take advantage of. Lord, I'm excited to be able to take a look at these wonderful ways in which you have made some exciting, unbelievable promises to us. Lord, help each one of us during these next few weeks together to really get excited about being able to follow through, especially on those if-then statements that you want to do these things if we're willing to do our part. So Lord, give us wisdom and direction and challenge us over these next few weeks as we look at your promises, and we'll give you the praise and the glory for it, for it's in your precious name we pray. Amen. Have a great week, and I'm praying for you down in Daytona. Have a wonderful day. I love you.